Buenas tardes. Welcome everyone to Bienestar's virtual storytelling panel on the early years surrounding Bienestar's founding in 1981. Bienestar is celebrating our Camino al Bienestar, our journey to well-being, through a series of events in 2021 celebrating our 40th anniversary, including a year-end event that will celebrate Latino music and culture. We want to thank LMC Construction and Kaiser Permanente for their support for this event. Today we are pleased to be joined by three community leaders, José Jaime, Rosalia Ginsburg, and Hector Hinojosa, whose decades of dedication to community development in Washington County during the 1960s and through the 1980s for farm workers and immigrants set the stage for the formation of Bienestar in 1981. My name is Nathan Teskey. I'm the Executive Director of Bienestar, and I will be moderating the conversation today. We will start with introductions of each of our panelists, then move to some questions that each panelist can respond to. And at the end, our panelists will have the chance to respond to questions from you, the audience. Should you have any questions for Bienestar or for our panelists during this conversation, please type them into the chat box on Zoom or in the comment section on Facebook Live. We will do our best to address these questions today, but we can also follow up with you after the event or directly answer you in the chat fields. Also, you should note this event will be recorded so you can share it with anyone you like. Everyone who is registered for this event will receive a link to the full recording. For those of you who are not familiar with Bienestar, Bienestar is a community-based affordable housing developer whose heart and history is in the Latinx community of Washington County. Our mission is to build housing, hope, and community for the well-being of Latinx, immigrant, and all families in need. We own 12 properties in Washington County with 509 affordable rental homes, and about half of those properties are dedicated to farm workers and their families. We currently have 2 projects in pre-development that will add an additional 263 units to our portfolio: Plaza Los Amigos in Cornelius and Nueva Esperanza in Hillsborough. Now to our panelists. First, José Jaime. José Jaime first came to Washington County in the 1960s while he was a student at Mount Angel Seminary. He's well known in our community and worked with the Valley Migrant League and 12 Mexican families to form El Club de los Amigos, a mutual aid group for farm worker families in Washington County. José Jaime was also involved in the founding of Centro Cultural and served as executive director at the time of Bienestar's founding. He currently lives in San Antonio, Texas, muy lejos de nosotros. We also have Rosalia Ginsburg. Rosalia was born in the Chaco region of Paraguay and spent much of her early life in Argentina. After Rosalia met her husband, Richard Ginsburg, in Argentina, the couple moved together to the United States. After a brief time in Colorado, where she worked in La Clínica del Valle, Rosalia and her husband came to Washington County. Rosalia joined the recently opened Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center in 1978 and was instrumental in establishing the Migrant Outreach Program. Under tents set up in migrant camps, Rosalia provided checkups, medical services, and education to the farm workers. Her husband was also a well-known immigrant rights attorney who was also a founder of Bienestar. Today, Rosalia lives with her son just a few blocks from the Virginia Garcia Clinic in Cornelius. And last but not least, we have Hector Hinojosa. Hector is a Mexican native who came to Oregon as a young migrant worker. Hector started taking on leadership roles as a teenager, serving on the President's White House Conference on Youth. His skills as a community leader were further developed during his 15 years spent in alternative education as a teacher, principal, administrator, associate professor, and guidance counselor. Hector worked as a corporate manager and as an executive, and negotiated with union leaders, including Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers. Hector was also a co-founder of Centro Cultural, Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center, and Salud de la Familia, all long-standing culture-specific organizations. Today, he continues to serve on numerous government and community advisory boards and is well recognized as a respected voice for the Latino community in Washington County. And I will add that for Bienestar, he has played an important role in helping us develop our plans for our 2 projects, Plaza Los Amigos and Nueva Esperanza, and connecting us to the history of the migrant workers and the immigrant community in those projects. We'll now move to our questions and conversation with our panelists. And I will start with some questions that help explore the context for the founding of Bienestar in 1981. José Jaime, the first question I'll send to you. Could you speak a little to the context for migrant farm workers in the 1960s and 1970s? What challenges did migrant farm workers face? What rights did they have? And what kind of conditions do they often live in, including their housing?
First arrived in Oregon was back in 1961. Came to study at the seminary of Mount Angel. And during the year, we would go out to the camps to teach Christian doctrine. And that was my first contact with migrant housing. It was temporary housing for agricultural workers that came to Washington County to pick up the crops, be it strawberries, all kinds of berries, cucumbers, potatoes, some. And one of the things that impacted me very, very much was the condition of the cabins. People living in the cabins, maybe from 6 to 10, sometimes if there were children, up to 12, in a probably 10 by 12 wooden box where they would have to sleep and to cook and to get with their lives as much as they could and to prepare themselves for the following day to get up early and go to work and pick up the crops. I was very young at that time. I was only like 21. And I was touched by the fact that I was training to be a priest. And at the same time, I was confronting a social reality of people that were in need, not only of Christian doctrine, but also of organizing themselves. That was in 61. But I went back after I graduated from college. I went back to Mexico, but came back to Oregon again in 1965. And in the summer of 66, I had more contact with Washington County in Hillsborough because during the summer, I was hired to help as a program aide and another seminarian by the name of Joe Garcia, who should not be confused with Joe Garcia, who was a state employee in the education department. He and I were contracted for the summer to take over the Valley Migrant League in Hillsborough because the leadership at the time was having some problems of trying to do other things for the Hispanic community that were not on the rules and regulations of the Migrant League as such. Actually, the director of the Migrant League by the name of Ruby Ely and the different workers at the time separated from the Valley Migrant League and formed a group called VIVA, Volunteers in Vanguard Action. And that's where, as the main leader was Emilio Hernandez for VIVA. In the meantime, Joe Garcia and myself were trying to continue with the business of the Valley Migrant League programs. And one of the things that we had noticed was that some of the families, some of the Hispanic families had already obtained and were owners of their own homes after living in the camps. They were able to, thanks to the help of like about 12 churches who helped about 12 of the families, they were able to buy their own homes because the principle was, if you want to stop poverty, you need to stop your migrancy. You need to settle down. And some of the families that settled down were Hector's parents, the Hernandez, the Treviños, and basically the 12 families that formed Centro Cultural later on. So the first main impact of looking for migrant housing was that particular group. Later on, Centro Cultural bought a little house and organized by the Catholic Church, by a Jesuit priest by the name of Arnold Beezer. In fact, he was living with Hernandez when he was providing his ministry to the Catholic community in Cornelius and surrounding areas. He was able to get Vista volunteers and Jesuit volunteers to help Centro Cultural because Centro Cultural couldn't afford to have their own workers. Due to different circumstances, Centro Cultural always thought that it would be the main area and the main organization to work for the Hispanic community. And they thought that building a 3-car garage and starting a school for mechanics would help the Hispanic community because most of them would spend a lot of money in their own old cars that they had. And it was then that a little girl by the name of Virginia Garcia died in one of the camps. And instead of having a garage, it was converted into the initial Virginia Garcia Clinic. But in that year, let's see, it was like 76, 77, the city of Cornelius was granted money to build the community center in Cornelius. But they refused the funding, close to $1 million, because the money didn't come with administrative money so that they could run the center. And Centro Cultural decided to take over those fundings and be in charge of the Cornelius Community Center, Centro Cultural. It was a big battle, and we finally were able to succeed. And at that time, Bienestar started to look for migrant housing. And that's when they started looking at Elm Park, the housing in Forest Grove. Much of the fight that had to happen was easier in a way because Centro Cultural already had bought the fight. So at that time, the city of Forest Grove did not want migrant housing there because they thought it was going to be poverty focus. It was going to be a garbage disposal for the city. It was all kinds of negative things that were brought.
José Jaime, let's I know Rosalia's husband was very involved in this too. Let's switch to a quick question to her, if that's all right. Rosalia, you worked quite a bit in the camps in the 1970s, and José Jaime just spoke a little bit about the founding of Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center and Centro Cultural. When you were working in the camps in the 1970s, could you describe some of the conditions you saw, some of the memories you have, and the story you told us the other day about the children you saw?
Oh, yes. I was voluntarily pretty much going out to the migrant camps at off times, working time. And I went through the Pumpkin Ridge and all around, and also McMinnville and the migrant camps there too. And the conditions, one camp is not the same like the other, maybe a little better, but always it was so full of people. They are 3 beds, we'll call it bunk beds, and with barely something to sleep on. They have to put their clothing and stuff because they didn't have mattresses, a lot of them. And then other things that really, I told the story to you before, is that little girl that was nursing the baby sister with her bottle there, alone totally in the migrant camp, a big migrant camp. And she was outside in the steps of the cabin and giving the milk to the little baby. So it was a run out for me to go to Maria and tell her what was happening, and Maria took over after that because I just kept checking and checking and checking other camps, and some were, clean and they have space to play and to have something, but most of them were hiding in the forest. And I was wondering why they put them in those hills that it was so hard to find even the family members in that time. And but that is what it was. Yeah, they were hiding. Nobody could see them. And bathrooms, they had showers. They had some of them. Others, they have to make a hole out there in the back or someplace. Too many people for a small space of bathrooms or whatever. And yeah, only one of them had actually showers for enough people when they came back from their work. So some good things also I've seen, but I didn't like the migrant camps too much. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very
Yes.
interesting. And of course, those migrant camps, the response that Bienestar had was to try to develop housing, which we're still working on today. Switching to Hector for a minute. Hector, I know you were involved in the founding of so many of the organizations that later set the stage for Bienestar, like Centro Cultural, Club de los Amigos, Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center. Could you tell us a little bit about the work that went into founding these critical organizations and the stories behind them? And I know José Jaime has already touched on some of this, but please tell us about the work that went into those organizations.
Thank you. As Jose Jaime was talking, I was reminiscing on some of the old days. And the old days is that we were a very small community, mostly Tejanos. We of Catholic uh, uh, denomination. We had a small group that were Seventh-day Adventists, another group out in the Gaston area that were born again Christians. But other than that, that was the only division that we had. The rest is a small group organized, pulling together resources, money out of their pocket. I mean, I have a document where mom and dad literally posted our home for collateral for the funding of some of these projects. And that's the commitment. So the commitment of our local community, again, mostly Tejanos, Católicos, were the inspiration. The first organization was el Club de los Amigos, which was basically a credit union for financial hardship that we could pool our resources together. If one of our members passed away and we needed to send the body back to Texas or wherever, we were able to fund that and then have the family pay back the loan on low interest rates. I mean, that's amazing work for these people to be doing in the 60s. Can you imagine? Ditto with El Centro de Petra Perez, which was one of the next organizations. And that was for bilingual, bicultural senior center for services for our community. And I won't get into why we named it Centro Petra Perez, but to tell you that she was quite a lady with her cane at the table, calling for order when needed to be. She was an amazing, amazing lady that we love dearly in our community and in our history. Centro Cultural really came when we just had enough. We had enough that we wanted to take ownership of our own narrative. We wanted to have a place where we could express our own language, music, food, art, etc. Even today, Nathan, we're still being told we can't speak Spanish in the presence of some organizations or white people for that matter. We have court cases that we have fought that are in the books as well. Education is another area. Rosalia that was talking about some of the camps that we used to go in to try to provide outreach, whether it was through Virginia Garcia or Title I migrant program, literally being chased out at gunpoint because the farmers and the growers wouldn't allow public access to community services. Again, had to file lawsuits until it finally was reversed. And for the audience, I invite you to look up Moreno versus Tankersley, 1966, and it gives you a good sense of what we were fighting back in the 60s. Let's see, what else? What did I leave out? I've got to talk about another organization that started alongside Virginia Garcia. By the way, I was blessed to be the summer school principal for little Virginia Garcia when she passed away as part of the migrant ed program, and had to send her home because of her infection and high temperature. Couldn't have her around the other children. But so sadly to say, she became the poster child of what later has become a movement for farm worker health. And so we continue that work, we continue that fight. We're into our 45th year and we're still not there. But anyway, one of the other ones was we had to take time out to relax and enjoy ourselves. So we started an organization called the Chicanos of Oregon Golfers Association, CHOGA, which is the home of the Chile Jalapeno Open. We're now in our 45th year, I put 47. Same age as Virginia Garcia. And those funds that we collect are for scholarships and are still being handed out on an annual basis by some of our community leaders back then that José Jaime was referring to, Valley Migrant League through Sonny Montes, who's still actively involved in that organization. A lot of community leaders that came out of that era that were ahead of their times that are worth mentioning real quick. Lupe Bustos, I think he was with Vista. Emilio Hernandez that José Jaime talked about with Viva. Sonny Montes out of Valley Migrant League. John Little, who became an honorary Chicano because he didn't think he should join CHOGA, the Chicano Golfers Association, when he was a European American or white. So we gave him the blessing and said, "You're a Chicano, John. It's okay." So we had great allies. One of the other ones were the Vista Volunteers. Jim Selesky was one of our first directors at Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center. We had another Susana Selesky who became an educator, retired out of I think it was Beaverton or Portland. These folks fell in love with us. We fell in love with them. They embraced our community and they didn't go back home. They stayed here with us. So great, rich history. I wish we had more time to talk about it.
It's great.
But,
Thank you. Thank you. There is so much. Let's pivot real quickly to the founding of Bienestar a little bit. José Jaime, you've told me stories about the role that Centro played. And I think one of the interesting things is all of these stories that the three of you are sharing are the formation of different groups and what social scientists call social capital. You have these groups forming and then they help other groups come later. And I think that's the story of Bienestar. José Jaime, you've told me a little bit about the role that you played and Centro Cultural played in supporting the development of Elm Park in the face of opposition. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and some of the memories you have of the advocacy and work that was done to build that housing?
I think one of the main influences, like I said before, was the fact that the Catholic Church in Cornelius was always ready and available to help organize the Hispanic community or be part of the organizing of the Hispanics in Cornelius. And I still remember, I never met him, but I still remember the Hinojosas and the Hernandez and the Martinezes speaking about Father Bravo, who was like a missionary that came during the summer months and tried to be of help and administer the sacraments to Catholics during the summer. But I think more conscious priest that came and started the real good organization was Father Bizer, like I said before. And in fact, it was through him that the different families, about maybe 12, 15 families, organized themselves. And by selling enchiladas and tacos and whatever, they were able to buy the little house of Centro Cultural, a two-story that used to be a hostel uh, before. And that's where they started organizing themselves. They organized the mechanic school, which never took place, although we bought the equipment and everything. They organized the clinic. In fact, Cipriano Salazar was one of the first directors of the Virginia Garcia Clinic. And in order for Centro Cultural to subsist, we were renting office space to Cipriano and his secretary, one of the Caballero girls. They were working out of our offices in Centro Cultural and running the garage, which was the Virginia Garcia Clinic, until 2 years later when they were able to buy the house across the street. After that, Centro Cultural was still able to nurture some other organizations. In fact, we were after we built the community center, Centro Cultural, we were able to have as renters OHTC, which at the beginning was California Human Development Corporation, and the Petra Perez Senior Center out of Centro Cultural, which later moved to another place. Then we also founded Adelante Mujeres, which is now, I think if we compare the Virginia Garcia Clinic and Petra Perez, they are just growing and growing and growing for the better of the Hispanic community and actually the people in need in general. And of course, Bienestar. We were able to always, whenever organizers of Bienestar were saying, we need community members to come and show up for meetings, they would come to the church and ask us, because I was ministering St. Alexander Church at the time too. They would ask us, can you call and get people to get involved? We need their participation in such a meeting or this other meeting.
Jose Jaime, these were like, you described to me once, meetings in Forest Grove to kind of go and advocate for example, for Elm Park. Those were the kinds of meetings you're talking about, right?
Right. And it was because we needed to show strength in the city of Forest Grove that people really needed housing. And it was a project that needed to happen. We would show strength in numbers. And one of the main organizers of the groups was definitely both Dick Ginsburg, Rosalia's husband, and Angelo Gomez. There was a third attorney, Ginsburg, Gomez, and Neo, that were forming the partnership. But it was Angelo and Dick that were mostly at the forefront of Bienestar, trying to move on and make sure that the Elm Park apartments did happen. And they did happen. And now the city of Forest Grove takes pride that they were the first city that provided migrant housing.
Yeah, that's great. And just so everyone listening knows, Elm Park is still there today. There's Elm Park 1 and Elm Park 2. There are 61 affordable rental homes in Forest Grove, along with other properties that Bienestar's developed. That's really great. Thank you, Jose Jaime. Let's switch over for a little bit to hear about what inspired each of you. What inspired you to get involved in this work and to keep working on this? And maybe we'll start with Rosalia and then let Hector get a chance. What inspired you, Rosalia?
Well, I didn't really have a sense that there was something big going on. So when I got married to Dick, to my husband, and so he says we need to help people, otherwise life is not counting much. Okay. So what do you mean? And he says we are going to help the migrants in any ways we can. So we started in Colorado, and yeah, La Clínica del Valle, as you say, and I told you, and it was very rewarding because otherwise they wouldn't have hundreds of guys in a military space in Colorado, and then over here hundreds and thousands of young people, and also parents sometimes, and occasionally families, and they really needed all what the planners did. Yes, and it was it was overwhelming in a time. Yes, in those times, because seeing so much, it reminded me of a movie that I saw from Germany, you know, the camps and stuff like that. So it was a little bit an issue for me at first, but we like to help people. We say we have to help people because otherwise life doesn't worth anything. So we did that, and yeah, and we extended. Maria Loredo was just someone that organized things so well, and she just sent us like stars here and there. Yes, and we found all the migrant camps whenever, because I pick up people. And another thing was that when that really touched me was one mother walking with 3 kids going back to North Plains to go to her camp from the clinic. And I say, where are you going? And she says, oh, we are going to where we live. And where do you live? In the hills, she says. So I picked them up, all the kids and stuff like that. So I put them, and yeah, they were in a camp up on Pumpkin Ridge up there. Yeah, and they were walking, and many people you saw walking on because they didn't have any transportation to bring them down to the clinics or to the church or whatever they wanted to do. Yeah, they were kind of secluded in those places, and only taken for work, and then bring them back, and that's all is what they did, the drivers. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Hector, do you want to speak a little bit to what inspired you in these times? And then we'll go to Jose Jaime.
Give me your question again.
Just looking back at the times when you got involved in the 60s and 70s, what inspired you to get involved and keep going?
My parents, they were my heroes. Dad was probably a 3rd grade education. Mom was a 6th grade education. We came from Mexico. I was 2 years old. And how they ended up over here, you know, with limited English speaking, can't read a map, and managed to find a way here to Hillsboro, Oregon. Actually, we went all the way to Washington and back. We did that about 3 times. The first time it took about 2 weeks to get here because of getting lost and not knowing where we were going. But settling here as migrant seasonal farm workers in a camp that was earlier described, we were lucky. Our room was 14 by 14. And we were a small family for the other migrant seasonal farm workers, but we all lived in this 14 by 14 room, which included the living room, the bedroom, the kitchen, the dining area, everything. And for restroom facilities, there were communal facilities, and you went outside and bathed with the other adults or children or whoever. It was just horrible, horrible to today's standards. Nobody would put up with that anymore. In fact, that's why most migrant camps have been closed now, because the Department of Health has realized that this needs to stop. We can't continue this. So we sort of shot ourselves in our own foot by protesting the conditions, and now we don't have the migrant seasonal farm worker, which to our standards coming from Mexico was a big improvement. You talk about affordable housing, that was it. Today that I visit Bienestar's facilities and I see what they have, and I'm just so proud of what the work you guys have done. The apartments are so beautiful with facilities, uh, each one having their own place, and they're kept clean, as Jose Jaime was talking about earlier. That was one of the big concerns, is that it's going to turn into a ghetto, and that was not the case at all. So again, my inspiration was mom and dad. They were limited resources, limited English, limited voice, and yet they were out there in the front lines all the time. I mean, they marched. We filed lawsuits in the city of Hillsborough, the county, for racial profiling, filed cases for housing discrimination, and so they taught me how to stand up. You have the skills. You've been blessed with skills and bilingual skills as well, and you need to stand up and help wherever you can. So at the age of 15, I became a Brown Beret at 15 years old. At the age of 17, I created my first leadership training program for Job Corps. As you mentioned in my introduction, at the same year, I ended up with President Nixon's White House Conference on Youth Leadership. So my leadership began developing very young. My mentors were the folks that we don't have time to talk about, Jose Garcia in Title I of Migrant Education, who later became my padrino, by the way. We all became extended family because we were such a small community. So they either baptized my son, or I baptized theirs, or so we became compadres. Sonny Montes, like I said, he was a young man, 21, and was part of the Chicano movement, and taught me a lot about that and farm workers. And Lupe Bustos, the same thing. El Señor Hernandez. Those were all my mentors. I just picked, different leadership styles from them and created my own. To the point where, like I said, I was able to sit across the table from Cesar Chavez and negotiate over 30 years worth of labor contracts with full financial authority to enter into collective bargaining agreements. So yeah, I'm really blessed with all the history, rich history that we've developed here in Washington County.
Excellent. Thank you, Hector. Jose Jaime, we'll turn to you, and then after that, we'll turn to some questions from our attendees here. Jose Jaime, you mentioned your faith as one motivation, but talk to us again about what the various things that inspired you to get involved in this movement.
I was not inspired. I was pushed to work for the Hispanic community. I was working and studying in Mexico when all of a sudden I received a visit from the Hernandez family that they needed help to reorganize because they were having problems with Centro Cultural trying to survive. So they asked me to come and work to reorganize the families and Centro Cultural through the church at St. Alexander's. They had already spoken to Gordy Molitor, who was the executive director of Community Action at the time. And they secured funding for a Latino program director for a couple of years, so that one of the programs that the director would tackle would be reorganizing Centro Cultural back in the 70s. So they went to Mexico, they asked me to come up, and luckily I was given permission to come up and help organize or be part of the organization of Centro Cultural and the families working with San Alexander's Church and Centro Cultural at the same time. we were able to, as I said, I was pushed into helping with this program, and I was inspired. I was really transformed. I was converted to the social work of Christians by Hispanic families like the Hinojosas and the Hernandez and the Martinez. That was my, I will admit, I was not inspired. I was pushed into working for the Hispanic community, and I loved it. I am glad that previously Joe Garcia, my seminarian friend, who later on left the seminary and became an attorney, uh, um, that he was trained by Cesar Chavez and Saul Alinsky and trained me more or less, or mentored me into that kind of social thing. And that's how I got involved with Centro Cultural. In fact, when I was director of Centro Cultural, there were people from Hood River and from Portland coming to ask us, how did we do, to found the Virginia Garcia Clinic? And we told them how we did it. And then they went back, and in Hood River, they founded the Clínica del Cariño. And then the ones in Portland, they founded also a clinica. I don't remember what the name of the clinica in North Portland is, but they also founded a clinica following how we had organized to found the Virginia Garcia Clinic. So
that's great. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, that touches on, so all of you are speaking to not just what inspired you, but how you inspired others as well. And that speaks a little bit to a question we have here from one of our guests. What can this generation or the next generation do to carry on and continue this work and continue to do the work of La Causa? I don't know who wants to take that. Maybe start with Rosalia. What can the current generation do to carry on?
First of all, she has to be conscious of what is really the need of the type of community that we served. And that is pretty much. After that, you follow your senses in a way. Is love. Is love for humanity. What really moves people to do good things. So I tell everybody, or one way or another, you need to help when things are this bad, in that time that where I was at least. And people donated money, donated food, bread, or whatever they could do so I can carry those carfuls of, goodies for the people in the camps. And I think God is the focus of the inspiration. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. Hector, what do you think about the current generation? What can you say to inspire them to carry on?
I'll tell you what, if I had the skills they have, millenniums, like my little brother Juan Carlos, who I think is on our chat there in our audience, what amazing generation that's coming up with the skills, knowledge that they have. They come with their little laptops and notebooks, and we didn't do that. We literally brought a pistol to the board meetings and said, okay, I call for the question, and boy, you better vote in the right direction. I mean, that's where we came from, and where we are today is to have, like I say, young people like Juan Carlos in Metro, and has been instrumental in helping Centro Cultural and getting financing. We literally didn't have block grants. We didn't have proposal writers like, my little sister, Sarah, that you have here in your staff. We didn't have those beautiful people. We made tacos and enchiladas one plate at a time. And that's how we raised funds for Centro Cultural and Virginia Garcia. And so grant writing and proposal writing didn't come until much later. So the inspiration is those of you that are out there that have a heart for the community, as Rosalia is talking about, and the skills that you have. we need your help. All of those things that we talk about exist today: education, socioeconomics, obtaining political influence, affordable housing, health, social justice, all those areas we still need help with. So please jump in, get involved. We need your help.
Thank you. That leads me to another question we have from our guests, and any one of you can address this. It's specifically about migrant housing today. The question is, migrant housing is an urgent concern. How much progress has been made to provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing in Oregon and Washington County? What do you think is needed to address the lack of housing for seasonal workers? And this is a current question. Do any of you want to tackle that one?
I want to say something before your question. I thought you were going to ask me about what.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I think I missed you, Jose Jaime. Thanks for saying that. Yes, what do you think? Let's go back to that and we'll come to that question in a minute. What would
Sure.
you say to the current generation, Jose Jaime? Sorry.
I want to say that hacemos camino al andar. We make the path as we walk. And I think the youth of our days are showing us how they are making a new path. I am really admired by the fact of the young people, especially DACA people, working so hard to protect their own rights, to get what they need to be more than fruitful citizens of this country. We make the path as we walk. And I think the youth are being leaders in that regard. Second, I think youth are more able to see what has been, what has gone before them, and able to learn from us. And they are ready to take on their own demons and fight their own fights. And I am really proud of the young people, especially of our Hispanic community, moving forward. More power to them. Young kids, move on. Keep moving. We make the path as we walk.
Muy bien. Bueno, ¿ya oyeron todos? Okay. Hacemos camino al andar. I like that. I like that saying very much. Thank you, Jose Jaime. Let's pivot to the question I was starting with, which is about migrant housing today being an urgent concern. How much progress has been made to provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing in Oregon and Washington County? And what do you think is needed to address the lack of housing for seasonal workers? Hector, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure. What is it? 2 years ago, the voters of Oregon voted for funds to be budgeted and afforded for affordable housing at the state level, the metro level, and here in Washington County. That has never happened before. That's the first time. So lots of money out there right now, thank goodness, and lots of projects going up and construction. And I'm really proud and happy for that because we certainly need it. The only problem that I have is that the eligibility that is being used for affordable housing is being used that is called the average earnings in your area. And so when you do that, your eligibility list or pool goes up to 48,000 a year. Well, the people that I work with in Washington County in the streets and Latinos don't make 48,000 a year, so they don't even qualify for eligibility. So I'm pretty saddened by that. I think we need to be very careful that we don't alienate our community again. Going through this initiative of designing affordable housing. The other part is that it's still not culturally specific. Affordable housing model is a 2-bedroom apartment. And our Latino families, we need 3 and 4-bedroom apartments, if that makes any sense. So given those two issues that I have a real problem with, yet there's a flux of new resources coming in. So while I'm happy, I'm sad that we're going to be left out again. I just know it. I know it. I know it.
we'll do our best not to have that happen. I think those are two good issues, Hector, you identified, which is, I might say that this issue of seasonal workers who temporarily have income for a month or two because that is a real issue in eligibility for affordable housing. Bienestar works with families to work with property management. If somebody works a ton of, let's say, overtime in June, and then they apply to live in affordable housing, and it looks like their annual income is, like you said, 48,000, when in fact, that's just because they have work for a month or two, and then they go to other work the rest of the year. And so that is, we've worked with families on that issue. And not to toot our own horn too much, there are many other developers doing good work, but Bienestar in our projects does develop 3 and 4 bedroom apartments, which not all developers do because it's more expensive to build and a little more complicated. So we certainly try to do that. Let's see, Rosalia or José Jaime, do you want to speak to anything about what you think is needed to address the lack of housing for seasonal workers? Either of you have any comments on that?
Let me say just one thing. I think if we are going to be looking for affordable housing for the poor, it's an illusion. When we are seeing that houses that sold for $12,000 back in 1960s or 70s when Centro Cultural was bought for $12,000. Now, if we are trying to look for housing, a 3-bedroom house in Cornelius doesn't go any cheaper than $350,000. And where are the poor migrants going to get even the possibility of getting a loan for that amount? I think we are facing ourselves a bigger wall than Trump's. I think if we are going to be looking at affordable housing, we need to start maybe going back to the origins of maybe forming community organizations to do community housing at affordable prices for the people that they are working for the people that are their members. Otherwise, in this market, forget it. There is no choice.
Yeah. Thank you, José Jaime. Rosalia, do you have any thoughts about that? About what is needed to address the lack of housing for seasonal workers?
Well, in Cornelius, I have been told that there are housings and that there will be, isn't the thinking, yes, there will be housing, and then they need some support, money support to be able to comply with that desire. And it's not only desire, need for that need, yes. That is what I say.
Yeah, Nathan, real quick.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the models that we didn't talk about that I still think would apply today in affordable housing that leads towards home ownership that José Jaime was just referring to. And that was a program called Self-Help Housing that we did. And I believe we got funds from the U.S. Department of HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And whoops, am I still?
You're there, Hector. Go ahead, we can hear you.
Sarah, I think I blew it here.
We can hear you fine, Hector.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My computer, I have a blank screen, so.
Oh, we can hear you.
So this housing, we're actually back to the original organizing model, is that the families would get together and be the in-kind down payment for the loan. And not only that, but we provided the labor. So we have about 12 homes in Cornelius that we built that are still up, believe it or not, after all these years. So we're not bad carpenters either, not just farm workers, but we can actually do construction work as well. And we have about 3 or 4 homes out in North Plains that still exist. And some of those family members still live there after all of these years. 30, 40 years later. So self-help housing, where the communities gets together, join resources, labor, and help to gain home ownership for one another, for the neighbor. Absolutely amazing model. I encourage you all to look at it.
That's great. Thank you, Hector. I will say just on a quick note, just to remind everyone, Bienestar is working hard to build more housing, cultural specific, the 2 projects in Cornelius and Hillsborough, 263 units, which I know there's much greater need, but we're very pleased to be working with Washington County and the city of Hillsborough on those 2 projects. Are there any, we're nearing the end of our time. And does anyone have any last inspiring words for our audience? José Jaime or Rosalia?
I want to say that if there is hope in our Hispanic community, the hope is placed on the shoulders of the young people. Young people, don't be afraid. Keep pushing, keep moving on. Thank you.
Thanks, José Jaime. Rosalia, it looked like you wanted to say something too.
Say, but I wanted to say that pitching in people, everybody in the community will, is like a little bank or something to donate places, and so they can have more housing. And I am so happy to know that in Cornelius we have some, because I live there.
Thank you very much, everyone. We're nearing the end of our time. I'll just remind everyone of a few other things. Thank you for joining us today on Facebook and Zoom. All of this panel is being recorded, so you will get a link if you signed up for this. You can share it with your friends and watch it again. Please also know that this is the first event that Bienestar is hosting in its 40th anniversary, celebrando 40 años, since 1981. We'll be holding another event in September, similar to this, a storytelling event with people who will address the 1990s and 2000s and the middle years for Bienestar. And then again, at the end of the year, we'll have our celebration, hopefully in person. So stay tuned for that. Stay connected to Bienestar. You can see on the slide there the link to the Bienestar website about our 40th anniversary celebration. I want to thank all of our supporters and sponsors for that as well. Very good. With that, who wants the last word from our panel? Anyone want to?
Yo les quiero dar las gracias a mis compañeros. Gracias, José Jaime. I'm hoping that you're enjoying your Tejano journey. Rosalia, it's so good to see you. Gracias a ti y tu esposo for all that he did in our community. Gracias.
Thank you. Qué hermoso, qué hermoso. Thank you very much, Hector. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon again in person.
Thank you.
Gracias. Gracias.
Gracias.
Gracias.